Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahweh Shai, Bahasham Recha Kudash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of Isaiah, the 19th chapter. And as you see in the subheading here, message to Egypt. And similar to, forget the exact chapter in Ezekiel, I think it might have been 28 or somewhere along those lines. Where you have a prophet prophesying against a country or a nation, which is also prophetically referring to America, right, or Esau or Babylon. As we know in the scriptures that Babylon is also referred to as spiritually Egypt. Okay, so in that spirit is where this prophecy against Egypt is mainly fulfilled, as we're about to go through. Right. And so just on a high level, it really just goes through the Lord bringing judgment upon Egypt, right? This spiritual Egypt here. And then the Lord bringing deliverance, okay, for the remnant of his people in gathering them from their various captivities and ultimately joining them to serve the Lord and be delivered. So this is Isaiah chapter 19, verse 1, and it reads, "The burden of Egypt. Behold, the Lord Yahweh rideth upon a swift cloud," which that cloud represents chariots, which the world knows as or recognizes as UFOs. And that's how the Lord is going to, as it continues, and shall come into Egypt, right? So now we know in ancient Egypt, the Lord had a chariot lead us out of Egypt, right, into the promised land. But here, the Lord is going to, when he makes his return, right, and he comes to this modern day Egypt, is going to be by way of the chariots. It says here, "And the idols of Egypt shall be moved," right? Move meaning to be afraid, right? To quake. So the things that are idolized here, right, from their different false gods and deities, to the things they hold in high esteem, all of that is going to be shown worthless and weak before the presence of the Lord. As it reads, "And the idols of Egypt shall be moved at his presence, and the heart of Egypt shall melt in the midst of it." And the heart of Egypt is going into the heart, meaning the mind, right? And of Egypt here is really the people, right? And it says it's going to melt, so it's going to become weak, vain, pathetic. And why is that? Because of the judgments the Lord is going to bring upon this place. "And I will set the Egyptians against the Egyptians, and they shall fight every one against his brother, and every one against his neighbor, city against city, and kingdom against kingdom." And that is that division, right, from political division, right, civil division, right. Now you're seeing here with these the whole ICE and / no king riots and protests. There's a great division on many levels, right, from race to point of view to political sides and parties and so on and so forth. But this is a part of the prophecy concerning what would happen in this land, as you would have basically these modern day or so-called Americans, not really so-called, fighting against each other, right? From an individual level to cities to, as you can see here, kingdom against kingdom. Verse 3, "And the spirit of Egypt shall fail in the midst thereof, and I will destroy the counsel thereof. And they shall seek to the idols and to the charmers." So it says the spirit of Egypt shall fail in the midst thereof. And so that spirit, which at one time allowed this place to be known as, one of the top countries, right, which both was booming economically, right, was feared as a world superpower, the Lord is crushing and bringing all of that down. And now this place is more so as a laughingstock, at least it reached that height in the highest form under Biden, which now you got Trump trying to make it great again, quote unquote. But if you have to make something great again, then that means that it's not currently it's not great, right? So as it says here, "And I will destroy the counsel thereof." So as the Lord moves prophecy forward, their counsels, right, their reasonings, their calculations, all of those things are all going to come to naught as these judgments start to prevail over this place. So eventually, from the higher ups on down to the average individual, they're not going to know what to do. As it says, they shall seek to the idols and to the charmers and to them that have familiar spirits and to the wizards. And they do that, right? Going when you go up the chain, up the ladder, they do consult with witches and priests and those that have familiar spirits for counsel, okay, in what sacrifices to do and how to move forward with their plans. All right, and that even goes down to the average common folk um, who also practice and delve into these things. Okay, but as it says, as they do all that, it's not gonna prevail, and it's mentioned in a similar fashion in Isaiah the 47th chapter, verse 4. And the Egyptians will I give over into the hand of a cruel lord, and a fierce king shall rule over them. Right, and now they're referred to as presidents. Right, so in this case, as we are seeing now, and we believe this cruel lord um, fitting perfectly Trump, right? As we're seeing him showing those horns, right? Showing that those signs of cruelty as it's going to escalate more and more and more as he begins to rule with that iron fist. Okay, as that's why it mentions here a fierce king ruling over them, saith the Lord of hosts. Verse 5. Now it starts to go into those judgments, right? It says, and the waters shall fail from the sea, and the river shall be wasted and dried up. Now, as you read, right, you'll notice here Isaiah uses the terminology of like ancient Egypt, but that's the case um, with different other precepts that are referring to, um, you know, say America, right? Obviously, he's not going to say America. He's not going to say Central Park, right? He's not going to say the Mississippi River, um, but these are all representations of different places here and how this place will be affected by these judgments. Now, don't get it twisted. The judgments that were pronounced against ancient Egypt also did come upon them. Okay, but there are certain parts in here that as you read, you'll notice this wasn't something that was directly applicable to the ancient Egyptians, especially getting as we get to the latter verses, right? But as it says here, verse 5, and the waters shall fail from the sea, and the river shall be wasted and dried up, which is going into those droughts, right? In Second Esdras, it mentions that, right? The springs of the fountain shall be stayed and shall not run. Was it for like 3 hours? I think it says, right? Which is just going into the droughts, right? That's food shortages as well, because for your crops to grow, you also need water. And as we read on down, you'll start to see the domino effect of the plagues the Lord is going to bring upon this place, right? And how it affects people, to their resources, to their jobs, to their economy. It says here, and they shall turn the rivers far away, and the brooks of defense shall be emptied and dried up, right? So those reservoirs, right? Those bodies of water that are used for also generating electricity and also for emergency needs, they're all going to be dried up, right? It says here, the reeds and flax shall wither. And reeds are those like plants that grow by the shore or the banks of bodies of water, right? So if you look up here, reeds and flax. See if they'll show us a good picture. Okay, this is not the best, but you can see you'll usually see these kinds of plants by the edges of a body of water. But as it says here, they shall wither, right? Why? Because there's no water. The paper reads by the brooks, by the mouth of the brooks, right, which is the banks, and everything sown by the brooks, so all plants sown by, right, shall wither, be driven away and be no more. And what is that going to lead to? That's going to lead to food shortages as well. The fishers also shall mourn, and they that cast angle into the brooks shall lament. Casting angle is like today you throwing a fishing hook into some lake to try and catch fish. So if the waters are dried up, then there's no fish for you to catch. One, as the water starts to dry up, the fish move and migrate. But depending on where they are, if that body of water is not connected to a larger body of water and they can't escape, then eventually they die. It says here, and they that spread nets upon waters shall languish. Yeah, so they're also the fishers and so on. They're also going to be, as it says, languishing because now they're not catching anything, right? And that's also a representation of um, one form of labor, but this is going to be spread widespread, to a lot more forms of labor, right? But these are just a representation of how the plagues are going to be affecting the inhabitants, right, and the civilians and the people. Like how when there's no water, fishes are affected. As it goes into verse 9, moreover, they that work in fine flax and they that weave networks shall be confounded. So those that use, because the flax, the papyrus, and all of that, you can use those raw materials and convert them into usable things, right? Whether you're weaving baskets or making something to write upon or whatever it is, people that are able to transform those raw materials into usable goods, they're also going to be out of work, right? They're going to be out of resources due to these plagues, and in particular here, this lack of water. It says here, and they shall be broken in the purposes thereof, all that make sluices or sluices and ponds for fish. Right? When we look at this in the NLT, right, it says here, the workers in cloth will be dejected, and all the wage earners will be sick at heart. CSB, Egypt's weavers will be dejected, and all her wage earners will be demoralized because they're not going to have, they're basically going to be out of a job. Verse 11, surely the princes of, now in today's day and age, right, it's not often that you have people that are, directly getting these resources and like hand weaving them and so on. But the modern day equivalent, right, of those whose jobs depend upon the functioning, system, right, the chain that produces the resources they need, whether it's been transformed from its raw material into some intermediary material that they use for their products or for their goods or for their company, they're also going to be likened on to these workers here who are confounded, or as it says here, the word that they use was dejected. Verse 11, surely the princes of Zoan are fools, right? And so Zoan and I think Noph, these are all regions in Egypt, right? But they're just like Egypt itself is in this case prophetically referring to America. These cities, though they're names of Egyptian cities, are not actually talking about like the actual ancient Egyptian cities, right? But their modern day equivalent. So, as it says here, the princes of Zoan are fools. The counsel of the wise counselors of Pharaoh is become brutish. So today you would have the cabinet, right? You would have your secret, conference rooms where you have these meetings. And say you take the president, right, which is likened onto the Pharaoh. His counselors are those that are in those meeting rooms discussing things with him, telling him what his options are, and so on and so forth, in terms of how to proceed with whatever it is that they're facing. So that's like the equivalent of the princes, right? As it mentions of Zoan, because the princes were people who were in high esteem, right? People that were in positions to make certain decisions or to influence the Pharaoh in making certain decisions. And you have the modern day equivalent today. So the point being made here is that they have become fools, right? The wise counselors of Pharaoh have become brutish. So at one point, those that were giving good advice, that were, knowledgeable in these things, they're going to be at a loss for words, right? Based on what the Lord is going to be doing to this place, the place he's going to bring, which is not just going to be just droughts, right? There's going to be many other plagues that the Lord has pronounced against this place. And they're not going to be able to explain what's happening or how to fix it. How say ye unto Pharaoh, I am the son of the wise, the son of ancient kings? Right. So, and this is just like him speaking, in I guess the term is facetious here, if I'm using that correctly. Right. But it's like, how can you even consider yourself to say that you're the son of the wise or the son of the ancient kings, to emphasize how much of a low position they would fall to. Verse 12, where are they? Where are thy wise men? And let them tell thee now. and let them know what the Lord of hosts hath purposed upon Egypt. See, because it's going to be that bad that nobody's going to be able to give them solid answers in what direction to move. And similarly, right, this is also here in Isaiah, the 47th chapter, as it says here. Yep, verse 12, stand now with thine enchantments and with the multitude of thy sorceries, wherein thou hast labored from thy youth. If so be thou shalt be able to profit, if so be thou mayest prevail, right? So go ahead and go and use your enchantments, use your sorceries, use your means of seeing and understanding and gaining this counsel, and see if that can help you prevail. And that's sarcastic because it can't. Similar to what's being mentioned here in Isaiah 19. Verse 13, the princes of Zoan are become fools. The princes of Noph are deceived. They have also seduced Egypt, even they that are the stay of the tribes thereof. Right. And so that seduction, right, is a means of altering the state of mind, right, in this case of the people. And as it says, even they that are the stay of the tribes thereof. So the stay here would be like the go-to ones, right? That would either point you in what direction you should go in, right, or lead the people in what they should believe. As it says, they have become fools, right, and they have basically misled the people here of Egypt, and they're gonna find that out the hard way when all hell starts breaking loose, and the people that they look to are not gonna have solutions for them. And they turn on the news to try and hear some good news as to what to do, and they're not going to get those sources. They're not going to get that information. They're not going to get that comfort. Verse 14, the Lord Yahweh hath mingled a perverse spirit in the midst thereof. Now, when you go into this word perverse, it says here, distorting, perverting, warping. So when you look around you, all around you today, that's exactly what you see. And it's getting worse and worse and worse, right? From where you have men becoming women, women becoming men. You have TGs from a young age. You got the alternative lifestyle community, and all these things that are going on here in the midst thereof. And that's because the Lord has mingled, right? When you mingle, you mix, right, that perverse spirit within this place. And that's why everything they do and every new thing they come out with is some form, deviant variation of something ungodly, right? Something perverse. And they have caused Egypt to err in every work thereof, as a drunken man staggereth in his vomit. See, when you see somebody that's drunken and they stagger, right? They're like, imagine they throw up and then they step in and then they slip and then they fall back in and they try to get up and fall back down again. That is this place, Verse 15, neither shall there be any work for Egypt, which the head or tail, branch or rush may do, right? And that goes the head or tail, meaning from the top on down, right? The branch or the rush is likened onto, it's synonymous with like head or tail, right? Very high quality plant versus an average one. They're all going to be out, as it says, there neither shall there be any more work. So going back up top, we read how the plagues caused, people to be out of work, right? It caused this panic, this confusion, right? And also this lack of work, which is going to mess up that economy. Verse 16, in that day shall Egypt be like unto women, and it shall be afraid and fear because of the shaking of the hand of the Lord of hosts, which he shaketh over it. And this is also mentioned in, I think it's Jeremiah 50, right? The men of Babylon have born to fight. They've become as women, right? Which is to signify fear, right? Or weakness, as it says. And they're going to be afraid and fear because of the shaking of the hand of the Lord of hosts, which he shaketh over it, right? And how is he doing that? Starting with the prophets, right? By sending the prophets out here to profess, right? And shake the hand at them, as the scriptures say, right? And profess the judgments that he's going to bring upon this place. As it says, and the land of Judah shall be a terror unto Egypt, right? And though it says land, is really referring to the people here. Okay, and it mentions Judah because the scriptures say, right, the Lord is going to raise up the tents of Judah first. And how are they going to be a terror unto Egypt? Yeah, there's going to come a time where, I believe it's in the book of Micah, right? That Judah shall be as a young lion among the sheep, which teareth them, in pieces. But it starts with the prophets, the teachers prophesying the things that the Lord has determined against this place. All right, as it's a terror onto this land, as they see us everywhere prophesying the downfall of this place. As it says, everyone that maketh mention thereof shall be afraid in himself, because of the counsel of the Lord of hosts, which he hath determined against them. And how are they hearing that counsel? By way of the prophets of the Lord. So anybody that makes mention of us, right, or references us, they don't want to hear it, and they try to put up a front, of like it being false, but it's really coming from a perspective or a standpoint of fear, because they're afraid of the things that are being said concerning this place, right? They're afraid that it would be true, that this is indeed what the Lord has determined and counseled against this place, because it's not going to end well for them. So they would rather push it off as false. But the counsel of the Lord shall stand. Verse 18, in that day shall 5 cities in the land of Egypt speak the language of Canaan, and swear to the Lord of hosts, right? And this 5 cities in the land of Egypt is really just a representation of places where Israel would be at, all right, in Egypt, right, starting in Egypt. And speaking the language of Canaan doesn't have to be, first off, the language of Canaan here is referring to the Hebrew, but it doesn't have to be, because people go here and say, well, do you speak it fluently? And we don't have to speak it fluently, and we don't have to be able to, know the entire Hebrew in and out. We know enough to gain the salvation, because first and foremost, we know the name of the Lord, which is in Hebrew, right? Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai. And as it says here, and swear unto the Lord of hosts, one shall be called the city of destruction. See, and so in order to be able to call upon the Lord, we need to have that Hebrew, because the name of the Lord is in the Hebrew. Okay. And as it says, one shall be called the city of destruction. And the reason it's, as it says, is the city of destruction is because that's a representation of what's going to happen to this place. Okay. So there is no actual city, per se, that is titled the city of destruction here in Babylon, right? But it's a representation or an omen or a sign, right, of what's going to happen to this place. Verse 19. And we see in this now, right, the fact that we're able to even speak a part of that Hebrew is a fulfillment of that prophecy. Verse 19, in that day there shall be an altar to the Lord in the midst of the land of Egypt. And what is that altar? That altar is the gathering of the prophets, right, on the corners and the different various locations, because us teaching this word is likened onto offering and offering up, an oblation to the Lord. And ultimately what we're doing is preparing, right, as we go into Isaiah 34, which likens the destruction of Babylon or America to a great sacrifice upon an altar. And as it says here, in the midst of the land of Egypt, and a pillar at the border thereof to the Lord, right, which is basically re-emphasizing that same point, all right, that you would have the prophets here in the midst, okay, of Egypt, likened onto that altar, all right, to the Lord. And it shall be for a sign. Now, as we go down, right, in these latter verses, as it gets more, Isaiah, speaks this, but it's in a dark scene, all right, and it trips a lot of people up, okay. But as it says here, and it shall be for a sign and for a witness unto the Lord of hosts in the land of Egypt. And that's exactly what it is, or what we are when we go out there and we teach, right? We are bearing witness, right, to the Lord of hosts, but we are a sign. As it says in the land of Egypt, for they shall cry unto the Lord Yahweh because of the oppressors. And that's what we're doing. The scriptures tell you about that in Isaiah 9:4, right? We're crying unto the Lord every time we do these lessons, and every time we go out there, we cry unto the Lord because of the oppressors. And as a result, as it says, and he shall send them a savior, the savior being Yahushai, and a great one, and he shall deliver them. And that's what the Lord is going to do when he makes his return. And to them is going to be the elect of the nation of Israel, which now, as we get into the latter verses, is going to start to shift focus towards. Verse 21, and the Lord Yahweh shall be known to Egypt, and the Egyptians shall know the Lord in that day. Now let's look at the word know, right? The Egyptians shall know, yada or yadai. It says here to know, to learn, to find out, to discern, to recognize, admit, acknowledge, right? To make known, to become revealed, right? To make oneself known. Now, when you read this verse again, as it says, the Lord shall be known to Egypt, and the Egyptians shall know the Lord in that day, and shall do sacrifice and oblation. Now, that's not one, that didn't happen with the ancient Egyptians. It's not happening now with the ancient Egyptians. Okay, so this has to be talking about a different Egypt or Egyptians. And these Egyptians here are referring to Israelites. Okay, but similar to other precepts, which refers to Israelites as Assyrians or Egyptians or even people of Sodom, it's just referring to, it's just here referring to Israelites, but it says Egyptians because Egypt was one of the main places of our captivity, both ancient Egypt and modern day Egypt, which is America or Babylon the Great. So in Isaiah 19 and 21, these Egyptians here that shall know the Lord are the Israelites, the captives in Egypt or in modern day Egypt, primarily the elect, the remnant, because the remnant are the ones that are giving their minds to know the Lord and doing that sacrifice and oblation, right? Offering up ourselves as a living sacrifice by way of going out there and doing the works of the Lord. It says here, yea, they shall vow a vow unto the Lord and perform it. And that's ultimately what happens when you wake up to this truth, you come into this ministry, you start to serve the Lord. That's likened unto vowing a vow unto the Lord. And the elect are going to be the ones to perform it, right? As the scriptures say, giving all diligence to make your calling and election sure. And through performing it, they would gain deliverance. Verse 22, and the Lord Yahweh shall smite Egypt. He shall smite and heal it. And this is very key right here, right? So this Egypt is still referring to Israel, even though it's using the name Egypt here. And this is why this chapter can be confusing to some, because in the top verses, Egypt is referring to America. And then in the latter verses, it's now referring to people, right? Or Israelites. But that's why, one, you need to have the spirit, but two, you need to read, like use the context of the verses, right? Because they make it clear. So as it says here, it's like here. So as it says here, the Lord shall smite Egypt, he shall smite and heal it, right? So the portion, when it says he shall smite Egypt, that's a portion, right? And that portion which is being smitten is the wicked of our people, right? Really, it was the whole nation at one point, but the healing is what the Lord is doing now, but it's starting with that remnant. So a part of Egypt is healed, which is the elect or the remnant, and there's a part that is smitten, which are I'm not going to say 2/3 per se, but the non-elect. Okay, but even they start with the 2/3 here, because the 2/3 we know are dealing with the two parts here in Babylon, right? And the focus of this chapter is Babylon, or modern day Egypt, which is America. So as it says here, right, continuing on that point of smiting it and healing it, right, you have this colon here. And so this next point is related to that point. And it says, and they shall return even to the Lord. The Egyptians, the ancient Egyptians, were never with the Lord in order for them to return to the Lord. And then understanding the Egyptians here to be the Israelites, not all Israelites are going to return to the Lord. It's only going to be that remnant. Okay, so they are the ones here that, as it says, the Lord is going to heal, and they're going to return to the Lord. And he shall be entreated of them and shall heal them. See, so they are that part of Egypt that will be healed. The rest of Israelites are going to be smitten, right? And so the Lord being entreated of them, meaning he's going to listen, he's going to hear the remnant, right? When they turn and seek to him, and in turn, he is going to heal them. Verse 23, in that day shall there be a highway out of Egypt to Assyria, and the Assyrian shall come into Egypt. Now, when it mentions Egypt here and it mentions Assyria, it's referring to Israelites nonetheless. Okay, but one, keep in mind that at this point where Isaiah is prophesying, the main known captivities that Israel has been in was ancient Egypt and the Assyrian captivity, and the Assyrian captivity was mainly the northern kingdom, right? Because when you look at the timeline, you see Isaiah prophesied. I believe he started prophesying a little before the northern kingdom went into captivity, so he witnessed that, right? But the Persian captivity, right, the Babylonian captivity, the Greek and the Romans, that comes after this, right? But the main point here is Assyria and Egypt were two main places of our captivity where we were held captives. And so when it mentions here Egypt and Assyria is referring to Israelites, right? The captives being in these various lands. And that highway, right, out of Egypt to Assyria is a representation of deliverance, right? That the Lord is going to basically make a path for the remnant of Israel, really scattered in different areas, to be gathered, right? A path for them to be gathered and delivered out of the various captivities or areas where we have been scattered. So as it says here, and the Assyrian shall come into Egypt, and the Egyptian into Assyria, and that's a representation of the gathering, okay, of the Israelites or the outcasts in these various areas that we were scattered to. And different precepts make the same point, just worded differently, right? That go into the Lord gathering his people from the various areas that they've been scattered into. And it mentions, in different precepts, it mentions different areas, different locations, some being including Assyria, some including Egypt, some including, Pathros and Shinar and all these different areas. But the point here that's being made is that the Lord is going to provide a way, right, of gathering his remnant from the various places where they've been scattered and delivering them, right? So it says here, and the Egyptians shall serve with the Assyrians. Now, when you go into that word serve, it says here, let's find it real quick. Ibad. Right, so we have the word ibad, which is to serve, labor, serve as subjects, serve God, right? And so usually when you have a lot of use cases for the word here, sometimes when you go into this Hebrew Chaldee lexicon, it gives you a better sense of which one of those best suits the verse you're looking for. So here, if we look here for Isaiah 19, right, and 23, which we're on, it mentions here, right, it says here, here belongs, and then you have Genesis, right, and they shall serve them, the Egyptians, and they, the Egyptians, shall evil entreat them. But it says here, right, B, to serve God or idols, i.e. to worship God or idols, followed by an account, I presume that I would say, and you have a couple of precepts here. And when you go down a bit, we see Isaiah 19 and 23 again. Right here it says, and the Egyptians shall serve, they put the name of the Lord here, with the Assyrians. See above as to the Arabic version, right, or Arabic usage here. So it's using here, serve here, as more like a worship the Lord, right? And so when you come, and that's why when you read this in other translations, right, they give that same sense, right? The NLT, it says here, the Egyptians and the Assyrians will move freely between their lands, and they will both worship God. Now, this isn't a literal highway because, there's, yes, in ancient Israel, you had paths, right, that were connecting one land to another, but there wasn't any direct highway that just straight connects Assyria to Egypt. That's not what it's referring to here, right, as we explained before. But as you can see, the NIV as well, right, the Egyptians and the Assyrians will worship together, right? Egyptians will worship with the Assyrians. And that goes to show you that this is talking about the Israelites, right, having been gathered and been delivered from their various captivities, their various lands that they've been scattered in. They would be, joined together and serve the Lord, right, in one spirit. Verse 24, in that day shall Israel be the third with Egypt and with Assyria, right? And so here it's just partitioning the nation, right, into three parts, which Egypt, Assyria, and Israel is still referring to the same nation here. Okay, but remember, Egypt and Assyria these terms are used here to represent or signify that we were captives, right, in these areas, right? These are some of our main or major captivities here. So as it says, Israel shall be the third with Egypt and with Assyria, even a blessing in the midst of the land, right? Whom the Lord of hosts shall bless, saying, Blessed be Egypt, my people, and Assyria, the work of mine hands, and Israel, mine inheritance. See, and this is referring to, it's showing you that Egypt, Assyria, and Israel here in these verses are referring to the same people, which are the Israelites, but starting primarily with the elect, right? They are that third, right? They are that blessing in the midst of the land, and they are whom this blessing is going to start with, right? Who are referred to as, blessed of the Lord of hosts, as it says here, and the people of the Lord, and the work of his hands and his inheritance. So with that, that brings us to the end of the book of Isaiah, the 19th chapter, where, as I mentioned, there are parts in here that, are in a dark saying form, but Lord willing, you're able to receive it. So in closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rachak Udash. Until next time, Shalom.